Good afternoon. My name is Jaden Newsom, and today I will be discussing the ethics of forced displacement. The direct relocation of residents places individuals in a strenuous position without support, eliciting immorality. Today, the issue still remains, as in Indonesia and Bangladesh, tribal people in frontier areas were forcibly removed, being viewed for their suspiciousness. Such behavior can divide contact within families, isolating relatives. Deriving from large population studies, it was documented that those who are more socially connected live longer as compared to the individuals with social deficits, who exhibited an enhanced likelihood of an early death, despite the cause of death. In addition, loneliness and poor social support were revealed to substantially contribute to the development and severity of the illnesses. To illustrate, Haruki Murakami, a Japanese writer, was split up from his family after the 1995 Hanshin earthquake. Murakami described feeling a deep sense of loss after hearing so, stating that there was no longer any actual connection linked to him in the Hanshin-kan area. This suggests that the aforementioned relocation can leave families estranged, prone to a worsened mental state, or undesirably, a premature death. Although the gentrification of disinvested areas may provide enhanced services alongside physical and social upgrades, these benefits are outweighed by the afflictions it provides to neighboring residents. A pertinent evaluation into this topic may assist in reframing developers' mentation, enabling them to consider everyone's position when going through this property development. Such evaluation brings up the question, is the revitalization of historically marginalized neighborhoods ethical if it results in the direct displacement of long-term residents? To answer this question, a social-cultural perspective must be taken into consideration. The act of forcibly displacing communities was and is still practiced, dating back to the 20th century. To illustrate, the amount of forcibly displaced individuals doubled from an estimated 40 million people in the early 2000s to 108.4 million individuals at the end of 2022. This equates to about 1 in every 74 people on Earth. Authors for the Digital Library World Bank Open Knowledge Repository indicate that yearly, people have to involuntarily relocate to safer shelter, of which has to be within their country's borders or in low or middle income countries where 76% of the forcibly displaced find refuge. Another critical concern that arises with forceful displacement is their effect on the ecosystem. A point of view relayed by the environmental journalist Ben Goldfarb signifies a 2000 study that found that infrastructures, take pavement, covered less than 1% of the U.S. despite affecting 20% of the United States. Scientists have conveyed that during the 20th century, roadkill surpassed hunting as a leading direct human cause of vertebrate mortality on land, an effect of habitat fragmentation deriving from the development of roads or forced displacement. Here is a graph deriving from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. This graph further emphasizes the forcibly displaced afflicted by said conditions. Next, the scientific perspective must also be considered. Forced relocation acts as a chronic stressor, compromising both the physical and psychological health outcomes in the forcibly displaced. Such a drawback includes high levels of malnutrition and disability. As proposed by Quadrado et al., displaced populations typically live in poor sanitary conditions, exacerbated by crowding, deficient nourishment, high frequency of exposure to various types of violence, and an enhanced risk of poverty. As Ivan Zilic, researcher for the Institute of Economics, stated, displacement also adversely affects systolic and diastolic blood pressures, two phases in the heart responsible for dispersing blood throughout the body. This suggests that displacement functions as a poverty cycle, as families are forced to focus on their immediate survival rather than profit. After recognizing the complexity of the issue, I developed two potential solutions. Firstly, prioritizing the freedom of movement and residence for long-term residents can assist in addressing the ethical dilemma with enforced displacement. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has several ways to approach this issue. Implementing safe, legal pathways or granting refugees the ability to travel provides access to alternative economic and social resources that can benefit refugees and their families as well as their community. Displacement researcher Lucy Hoville and the director of Refugee Law Project Zachary Lomo corroborate this idea with research from South Sudanese, explaining that the South Sudanese refugees traverse great lengths to approach the issue of repatriation. Repatriation is the returning of a refugee to their country of origin or habitual residence. Repatriation is not always voluntary, sometimes forcibly relocating refugees into dire situations or conflict zones. To illustrate, Rwandan refugees who sought shelter in Tanzania were forced out in the late 1990s. Some Rwandans returning to Rwanda face vast amounts of violence, with some being decapitated, others killed in road accidents. On the contrary, South Sudanese refugees spread geographically, having some family members repatriate while the others stayed in Uganda. This was done to assess whether or not stability would continue or enable their children to continue to pursue their education. It was denoted that their coping strategies were found to be crucial during the time of South Sudan escalating conflict. In addition, Hoville and Lomo emphasized a need for freedom of movement and residence, conveying that allowing refugees to select where they believe their possibility of ensuring a sense of community is best further enables them to other rights. It was found that refugees available to traverse freely were more likely to have the ability to access necessities essential to survival. However, these laws hold limitations. Firstly, contemporary refugee policies require refugees to have their rights restricted during encampment, signifying that refugees depend on the aid provided to them, as it is federally restricted for them to do so themselves under current law. Secondly, within the Great Lakes region of Africa, citizenship is granted not based on one's birthplace, instead it is granted through their inheritance, accentuating that this concept could be applied to a broader global context. The following bar graph, created by researchers at UNHCR, conveys the amount of individuals affected by forced displacement from 2014 to 2024. In 2014, 60 million were forcibly displaced, yet in 2024, the value of forcibly displaced doubled to 120 million. This increase in the displaced further supports the aforementioned estimation made by researchers at World Bank. This increase in involuntary relocation typically places refugees in low or middle-income countries where, as previously mentioned, 76 of the forcibly displaced find refuge. Overall, the number of forcibly displaced is steadily rising, emphasizing the substantial account of individuals subjected to disadvantageous conditions. If refugees or the forcibly displaced are denied the right to legal citizenship, they'll remain trapped in a cycle of dependency on restricted aid, unable to secure the resources necessary for their own survival. Since the list of limitations outweigh the implications, I developed a stronger solution. By analyzing data on refugee inflows, federal government programs can anticipate an onset crisis, allowing them to weaken the impact of such an incident by preparing. As stated by Ashleyman et al., the innovative displacement crisis response mechanism is a funding window that rapidly scales up projects in response to refugee inflows, serving as an effective disaster manager. The DCRM reduces the financial impact of such disasters on societies as a whole. However, there are limitations to this solution. Displacement by disasters are typically substantial, rallying hundreds of thousands of persons within a few hours and can take place unpredictably, exacerbating preparation efforts. If said disaster has an irreversible impact on the environment, refugees previously located there cannot return. Various states have conveyed fear for preparing as such as refugees previously located. Various states have conveyed fear for preparing for such, as they feel that they may influence an even bigger inflow of refugees to relocate. If states begin to appropriately monitor inflow data in pursuit of preparedness for refugees' necessities, the perception of refugees will transform from being a burden into an individual who brings new human capital, skills, and the potential to be a resourceful agent of local economic development. Such integration will also assist in implementing durable solutions instead of relying on government aid. Overall, the problem is causing severe adversity to the forcibly displaced, and without changes made to regulations in which allow citizenship, those forcibly displaced will continue to be compelled to harsh living conditions in which assistance is required. Here is the evidence I used to develop my argument for these.
Thank you very much. We'll get started with the first question. So, Jaden, what evidence did you gather that you did not use, and why did you choose not to use it?
I found various pieces of strong evidence deriving from Taylor and Francis online. However, I was unable to use this first-hand testimony from the directly displaced that served as an example of my argument due to my limited time frame. I instead included contrasting data that further exemplified the difference in economic classes, demonstrating refugees' dependency on assistance. I believe this data effectively spotlights the urgency of resolving forced displacement.
Thank you. And if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this issue?
If I were given more time, I'd have researched for more testimonial evidence relating to the devastations in which the forcibly displaced are put through, and then before so. In doing so, I'd be able to emphasize the effects inflicted on lower class individuals in comparison to the higher class. This would further accentuate my claim on market-driven displacement, though I removed that claim due to lack of space for such.
Thank you very much.